I'm Eric Wolf, and my experience in business peer groups has changed my life, especially my membership in Vistage, one of the world's largest CEO advisory groups. I'm an entrepreneur, a business owner, and a Vistage speaker on the power of marketing. This podcast is dedicated to the people who make those experiences possible, the peer group chairs. Every episode, I interview a Vistage chair who has dedicated their time to helping entrepreneurs like me succeed. Welcome to Chairwaves. My guest today is Mr. Jim Heller, who is joining us from Detroit, Michigan. And Jim, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
I was fortunate enough. Now, the first time I went to Detroit was I think it was about a year and a half ago, actually, to speak to a couple of Vistage groups, and I really like Detroit, and a lot more than I was expecting. It's one of those cities that I think gets a bad rep.
I would agree with that. I think most people are pleasantly surprised when they come to Detroit.
It was great. The food was good. People were friendly. It was a truly nice place to be. And by the way, I'm a native New Yorker, and Detroit pizza is the first regional pizza that I can say holds any kind of candle to New York pizza. Detroit pizza is fantastic.
It is. It is. I'm really glad you had that experience.
So you came to Vistage originally as a member, and we've talked to a number of chairs that have had that experience, that started their Vistage journey as CE or key members, and then ended up becoming chairs. But you were a member, and you were the fourth generation in charge of a family business. Tell me about the business, and tell me what it was like for you coming in as the fourth generation of leadership.
Okay. So we had my family had a machining company. My dad and my grandfather started right after Second World War. And my parents had two sets of kids. I'm the oldest of the second set. So there was a generation in between my father and I that ran the company. I swore that I would never work there. So I went to engineering school, went to work at a Fortune 500 company in their training program, figured out that after about a year and a half, figured out that their values and mine weren't quite aligned. And around that time, got a call and was asked if I wanted to come back and run a division of the business. They wanted to buy a company and they were looking for somebody to run it. So I was gone for a year and a half. I had some other jobs while I was in college working for larger companies, but ended up back there and worked there for 32 years. My goal was to not be the one that screwed up the business, right? Fourth generation is not very many companies make it that far.
Correct.
So that's how I ended up there. When I was then asked a number of years after I started there to run the company as a whole, I looked at how can I prepare myself best to do that. The company had grown dramatically since I started there, and ultimately settled on a peer group, which is what it's now Vistage. Back then it was called Tech. But so I was a member for 8 years until I fired myself as CEO of our company.
Was that a tough discussion when you got called into your own office?
No. And it was interesting because there were a number of people that worked in the business that said, I could never have done that. And frankly, for me, it was the most selfish thing I've ever done in my life.
So, and I take it then that your nightmare didn't come true and the business survived you. Who ended up succeeding you as the fourth generation family leadership?
Excellent question. So what happened when I fired myself, I brought somebody in from the outside to be our CEO. There were changes that needed to be made in the business, and I knew what needed to be done, but I was concerned about. Um, we only had one shot at it at the time, and so I
Hmm.
was very fortunate, actually through Vistage, not directly, but through contacts that I had made through Vistage, found somebody that had helped privately held businesses transition from an entrepreneurial business model to a more professionally managed model. So brought him in as CEO. He and I ultimately ended up buying control of the business, and I took over business development, and then we worked together for 12 years after that.
What was it like for you? Because you had, and this is the story of a lot of people who are parts of families that run businesses. Famous last words, I'm never going to come and be in this business. What was it like for you to break that promise that you had made yourself?
Um, well, like I said, I was in a Fortune 50 company in a training program and and a leadership training program, and I was being trained and watching um, people do things that just didn't fit with my leaders do things that just didn't fit with my values, and I didn't. I decided I didn't want to be put in a position of having to compromise certain things. So the opportunity presented itself, and our family had bought a number of other businesses prior to me coming back. So in Detroit, there were people that knew who we were, and or not me, but the other parts of the family. And so it wasn't a surprise that an opportunity presented itself. Um, Again, it was values based, and a desire to, I guess, secondarily a desire to come back. But I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Blind Side, but um,
Hmm.
at the right at the very end when um, he said to the investigator, he said, you never really asked me why I did what I did. And she said, okay, why did you do it? And he said, well, because this is my whole family goes to Ole Miss. That's why I went to Ole Miss. And so in some ways it was that as well. I had
Right.
older brothers-in-law. Everybody was in the machining business. It was kind of that's what our family did. I mean, it goes back what, three generations to my grandfather to the early 1900s.
And were you machining parts for the automotive industry? Were you connected to that world at all?
We actually, being in Detroit, we didn't do a lot of automotive. We did more heavy equipment, diesel
Okay.
fuel injector, hydraulic components.
Oh, okay. Very interesting. So your experience then as a Vistage member, it sounds like was largely a good one. And what was the change that happened in you when you joined when you joined the Vistage group for the first time?
The so as a business, we were involved in our trade association, and once a year they would have this thing called management update where we'd all get together and we had speakers and then they had roundtables. And I always found the best part of those meetings were the roundtables, where I had a chance to go and talk to other people. I'm more of an experiential learner than I am a book learner. I can do it, but I much prefer to talk to people and learn from them. When I was introduced to um, Vistage, actually by somebody in our industry, it was really attractive to me that I could get to go to one of these events once a month, basically, and sit down with a bunch of really smart people and learn from them, get their input on our challenges, and learn from their challenges. And so it was extremely rewarding from a strategy standpoint. It really opened my eyes and carried me out beyond our industry. Um, I guess the biggest lesson I learned was um, that all businesses are the same at the level that Vistage operates. Businesses are basically all the same. It's money and people, and The rest of it is details. So I got to interface with some really great people.
That's that's very. I mean, that's what we get when. That's why we do the Vistage thing and why we sign up to be members is to have that experience every month, and it's very cool that you got that. What was the transition process to becoming a chair? How did that happen?
So when I fired myself, I left the group, but I stayed in touch with my chair. So for 12 years, he and I talked probably every 6 weeks. We had become friends after 8 years together. He was very kind to me. He was a great mentor. Um, and ultimately, I had two partners. I had the CEO and I had the generation that was ahead of me. They wanted to retire, and I decided that I didn't want to borrow a bunch of money to buy them out. So we made the
Mm,
decision to sell the business. And when we were getting ready to do that, my chair said to me, he said, "Okay, what are you going to do next?" And I said, "Well, I have an employment agreement. I'm going to continue to work in the business." And he had gone through the same thing. He had sold his company before he became a chair, and he just looked at me and said, "No, you're not." He said, you won't stay." Well, what are you talking about? He said, "Just trust me." He said, "You're going to end up leaving. So you need to start thinking about, as any good chair does, right?" He was challenging me, you know, from the beginning. What are you going to do? Well, okay. So over a probably 9 or 10 month period, I started with his coaching and help. Um, I started thinking about what I wanted to do, and he had been after me for years to become a chair, and I just kept saying, "Nah, I'm not. That's not for me. I'm not." Anyway, long story short, and I think he did this on purpose. He invited me. He got to. He retired at 86. He retired from being a chair at 86 years old.
wow.
When he was around 80, I don't know, 3 or 4, he had to stop driving. So he called me one time and he said, "Hey, one of my old groups is having a dinner meeting, and I don't have any way to get there. Would you take me to the meeting?" Okay, sure, I'll go with you. Well, the chair of the group was a guy that I had been in Vistage with, and I don't, after dinner he comes over and sat down next to me and he said, "So tell me why you're not doing this." I said, "Well, I had a few," and he summarily shot down all of my objections, and so that really got me thinking about becoming a chair. And so I think it was about a year and a half later is when I finally made the transition.
And how was that for you? What was that transition like?
Well, I'll describe it this way. I left our company in December of 2019, and I started building my chair practice in January of 2020. So, what, 8 weeks into the process, we all got sent to our rooms. And so 2020 was a cliffhanger of a year, trying to build a business or build something that relied on personal contact and personal interaction when I wasn't able to do that.
Right.
So I learned a ton about myself. I grew a lot. Um, I had to learn how to get rid of a lot of anxiety during that time. Um, and I was fortunate. Um, the other person that I went through chair training with, he and I became very close, and we kind of he was a couple months ahead of me getting started, and we spent time supporting one another. The chair community here in Detroit is extremely supportive, and it worked out really well. So I learned patience. Let's put it that way.
I think that a lot of people in early in their chair careers are forced are forced to learn extra patience,
Yes, yes,
and of course more so. during COVID times.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. But it's you know what, it's been a skill that has come in extremely handy.
So you've got four groups. You've got two CE groups. You've got an emerging leaders group, and you have a trusted advisor group. Um, tell me, tell me what the emerging leader program is a different sort of thing than a lot of the other Vistage, a lot of the other stuff in the Vistage ecosystem. Tell me what led you to get involved in that, and why you decided to become an emerging leader chair.
So during COVID, one of the things that happened was the company that bought our business decided to exit a particular customer and market that we were in. And that customer reached out to me and asked me if I would come and help them source all the product that they were getting from us. So this has nothing to do with Vistage yet. And it was a startup company. The average age of the people in the business was 26. The general manager was 46, and I was 56. And so I worked with them for a little while, and the general manager said to me, he said, would you be willing to come and just be a mentor 1 day a week? It's a very engineering intensive company. So a lot of really smart people who just didn't have any real world, exposure to the real world. And so I ended up spending a day a week there, um, for quite a while, um, just helping them out with things, whether it's communication issues or leadership issues or technical stuff. So fast
Right.
forward to when it was the opportunity to bring emerging leaders to Detroit. There weren't any chairs that were interested, and I said, you know what, I'll do this because it's a ton of fun working with people that are new to leadership. And so I was able to build the first group. We had 20 people in it, and it has been an absolute blast. Um, Helping people, companies, just in general, the way our economy has developed, companies have leaned out so much that managers really struggle to find time to help their people develop. And in many cases, people that are in those emerging leader positions, they just need somebody to talk to. They need somebody to
Right.
ask questions, how do I deal with this, that, or, what do you think about this or that? And I love that stuff. So um, it
Being any kind of leader can often, and this is a subject that gets talked about on this podcast quite a bit, but being any sort of leader is by its nature a little bit lonely.
absolutely,
And people tend to be less lonely, I think, when they're parts of bigger companies versus when you're an entrepreneur and it's very much just you. But
yes,
there's also a particular kind of loneliness that comes with being asked to lead for the first time, because you're walking that tightrope of I'm new at this, I'm scared, maybe I've got a touch of the imposter syndrome, um, and I'm almost afraid to ask for help because it's going to make me look incompetent.
exactly, exactly. And programs, the emerging leader program really helps. It, it was incredibly rewarding to watch the first cohort that we did, um, the transformation from the first meeting to the last meeting,
Right.
and the people that really grasped onto it are completely different leaders than when we first started. Um, it's really rewarding.
And that along with the advancing leaders groups um, being really the only major parts of Vistage that actually come with a curriculum. How is it different for you going into your emerging leader group and managing that versus, say, the CE groups?
Well, when I first started, I worked hard at building the afternoon session to be an extension of the morning and really try and drive the topic home. The longer I've worked with it and the more I think about it, there are 12. First of all, it's curriculum based, and it's the only thing. Advancing Leaders has a curriculum, but it's not as structured as, excuse me, it's not as structured as the Emerging Leaders program. And Emerging Leaders is the only group where you go in, you're in for a while, and then you leave. Advancing
Right.
Leaders is there's no necessarily defined end to it. So it's a little bit more transactional, if you will, and it's topical. So it's different than like my CE groups or my TA group, where the bonds don't necessarily build the same way. Um,
Right.
what has happened over time is, frankly, I've modified things a little bit and um, shifted some of it to, we don't do issue processing per se, but we do a form of it because A, it's helpful, and B, it does build those bonds, and hopefully people will, even if they graduate or when they graduate and they leave, they've got other people that they can talk to that they've had a common experience with, as they advance through their career.
One thing, real quickly, that I wanted to bring up, because it's an interesting thing that, so I figured we should talk about this before it slipped my mind. But Vistage, Michigan is sort of its own animal. Um, can you talk real quick, just for a minute, about what the differences are between being a chair in Michigan and being a chair most anywhere else in the country?
I can talk about what my perception of the differences is because I
No,
haven't,
that's fair.
I've never been a worldwide chair, although I have friends that are chairs in worldwide. Um, yeah, Vistage, Michigan is this year 51 years old. We celebrated our 50th anniversary last September. And our founder just passed away actually toward the end of last year. Um, so we're a licensee. Our meeting model is a little bit different. We meet 9 times a year instead of 12. Um, Other than that, the concept is the same. The goal is to help leaders grow and make better decisions and build their teams and do whatever we can to support that and help them. Um, I don't know about worldwide. Vistage, Michigan is super supportive of the members. It's a members first culture, and let's put it this way, Eric. I describe this. This is something I get to do.
Right.
I'm incredibly blessed to get to do this.
Well, and it's interesting for me because um, I interview chairs all the time. I get to know a lot of you guys, and that's fun. And when I do that, so everybody, or I shouldn't say everybody, but most people, especially who might listen to this, are familiar with the concept of the group numbers. And like like my CE group is 5,800 and something, and you look at your groups, which you sent me, and it's CE 38, CE 50, EL 1,
Yeah.
and it's funny because you guys you have created your own sort of Vistage microcosm in Michigan, and you're doing Vistage things, and you're tied into other Vistage resources like the speakers and other things, but you're also simultaneously doing your own thing,
Hmm. Yeah.
and that's an interesting take on it.
It is, and um, again, we're member focused, as I believe worldwide is, and we do everything we can to bring what we can to the members. So
And I imagine that with the chairs and the rest of the structure, because you're focused exclusively on the Michigan, uh, within that geography, that it's a very tight knit community for all of you guys as well.
yes, it is. It is.
What's I'd love to ask this question, because it's fun for me, because I think a lot of people don't realize that, um, how much the chair gets from running the group. What is the best lesson that your members have taught you in the time that you've been a chair?
Oh wow. Um, I think the best lesson I've learned is that the best thing I can do as a chair is be present. When things are really difficult, just being there for people. And if I think back about it, it's one of the reasons why I decided to do this. I've I've made a lot of really expensive mistakes in my life, and I have been incredibly blessed to have people stand with me during those times to just be there. And they might have been standing there saying, "All right, this isn't going to hurt like crazy, but it's not going to kill you." And
Right.
sometimes that's what you need to hear. And other times, my chair, um, he, I know that he dropped stuff for me. There were a couple of times where I called him and I was really in a tough spot. And I know full well that he rearranged his schedule to help me. And my goal ever since then, and that's almost 20 years ago that that happened. And my goal is to do the same thing for the people that you know, I get to interface with. And they are kind enough to let me into their world, and so I want to do everything I can to help them.
That's a really really terrific perspective, and I like that a lot. We're running short on time, but um, if folks want to get in touch with you, if they have questions about Vistage, about your groups, about how not to be the end of the line in a fourth generation family business, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Best way is my email address is jheller, Heller, at vistagemichigan.com. That's another difference. Our email
That's
addresses are
right.
different than everybody else. I'm also on LinkedIn. There are two Vistage chairs named Jim Heller.
And
Myself,
you're the good one. You're the better one.
until I meet the other one, yes, I'm the good one. He and I have communicated a little bit. We've never actually met, but so I'm on LinkedIn, Jim Heller under Vistage in Michigan, and so I can be reached that way as well.
Very cool. Thank you so much for being my guest. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Chairwaves. You can subscribe to our feed using Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your platform of choice. You can also visit chairwaves.com for more information. Chairwaves is hosted and produced by me, Eric Wolf, and to connect with me, you can visit my website at ewolf.live. That's EWOLF.live. And a disclaimer, while I love Vistage and CEO peer groups, this podcast is not owned by or affiliated with Vistage or any other peer organization. Thanks for listening.